Hi TAMS users. I'm going to be making this video about data comparison tables, or DCTs. They are probably the most important and flexible report, but because they are so flexible, they are difficult to use. They can be used for analyzing codes and are especially useful for analyzing the relationship between context codes and data codes. But they can also be used to look at context codes to context codes, as you will eventually see. I'm going to do sort of two parts to this video. The first part is just going to be sort of a tour of all the pieces of the data comparison table. And the second part is going to demonstrate playing with and using the data comparison table to get some work done. I'm going to use the project I always have been using, or mostly have been using in these videos, which is my study of how future science teachers view using fiction to teach science concepts. I open that project up and I'm going to do a simple, unlimited, that means there's no search criteria, simple search, which will return one row for every time I applied a code to the data. So basically, the 176 rows of this table are basically referred to the 176 times I applied a data code to something. The data comparison table is so important that I have it right here on the toolbar as a basic feature of TAMS. So I'm going to hit that button in a second, but you should know that the data comparison table uses whatever the current selection is of the results window. Just as a reminder, results windows have both a front stage and a back stage. That is, there's always 176 actors available to you, but not all the actors are going to be visible here on screen. To winnow down, you open your select sort drawer. You might click on a particular column and search for a value. I'm going to look at negative reasons that teachers said they couldn't use or shouldn't use fiction in their teaching. I'm just going to type neg and hit return, and that has moved us to 37 out of 176 rows. All right, let's get a report on those. I'm going to click Data Comparison, and this really begins part one, which is the tour of the data comparison report. Now, the way to think about a data comparison report and what it's really based upon is an Excel pivot table. When I did a study of the anthrax attacks of 2001, I constantly was needing to export data to Excel and run pivot tables. And eventually I just decided to bring that capacity into TAMS Analyzer and to make it more appropriate for qualitative data. So, or semi-qualitative data. So what you have in this, you can see it here in the upper right axis summary, is you have an X, which refers to what's going across your table, and a Y, which is what's going down. So here you can see we have the codes that are going to go across, so alphabetically they're just going to line up all the codes. And down we have a single column, though really it's a single row because Y is going down. And it should say single column or row, but that's fine. Where do you determine these things? You have this little menu, X and Y, and then you pick what you want on that axis. So you can see here we have codes, code sets, value sets. Value sets are just arbitrary groups of words that you can use to analyze a column with. File sets, some other column other than codes, because codes is using the coding column, and that single column option. You'll notice it's blurred out. Why? Because Y has grabbed that. You can't have both X and Y being a single column. All right, we're not going to get into many things here. Just point out that depending on what you pick here, different things turn off and on, different options are available. So I picked code sets, and here's a list of code sets. I can use a command click to pick multiple ones. I can click exact, which means as this program goes row by row through the data, if it runs into a code, does the code have to match exactly, or is it good enough to be part of the code family? All right, so you can see all of these things. I'm going to return it to codes. Again, it changes the options that are available. I'm not going to explore all of these options. There's so many and so many variants. You will have to play with them. And by the way, playing with the data is kind of what this report is about. So this controls your X, this controls your Y. So if I change this to file sets, you see it says file sets there. This tells you what you've kind of summarizes what you've selected. But what goes into the table is determined here. I refer to the stuff at each row and column intersection as the data elements. And you can see there are lots of options here. There's a whole set of options just if you want your data, which is the default selection here. But you could click and command click multiple columns to show up in your report. And we'll play with that later on. I just want to say that you can also drag these elements up and down so that if I wanted gender underneath file name, I could drag gender below file name and then command click as appropriate to get those two there. I can add a totals column. And one thing that's going to come up almost immediately is what to do with redundant data. And you have options both in the elements field and in the total field not to count redundant data. You can set up your X and Y. You might look at your graph and say, oh, that's so ugly. I wish I had picked Y as X and Y. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is come here and click the switch axes, and it will switch those two around. This little thing is just about whether you want your HTML formatting to be kind of the classical underlined text. It's actually pretty ugly when you do that. So by default, it colors your elements blue. And it turns out those are live links to your results table, not to the web. But basically your report is linked to your results table. When you click on one of the elements, it will pull up that data and show it to you on your results window. All right, you can format the justification of things. The top refers to the numbers going across. In this case, it would be the codes. The left side refers to what's along the y-axis, and then the data itself. And you can choose to justify things center, left, or right. You can also do that vertically with each of those elements separately. I can give my report a title, and I can save my report. If I click this, it will save the table details. This will delete whichever saved thing is picked there. If I want to clear that table completely, I just click the negative. I would leave this checked. This is a very critical button. This is the button that actually takes everything you've done here, picked all your options, and puts it together in a report. You have a settings, and then you have a preview look. This is where that report will appear. But often you're going to make lots of different reports. You can't just have this preview tied up with whatever your latest one is. So you'll want to open those reports in new windows if you like what you've created.